As a neurodivergent, I find that the demands of day-to-day life can often leave me feeling completely wiped. And the common prescription is self-care. Great concept, really hard to apply. Why? Because at the end of a long working day, I have no gas left in the tank and I don't have the energy or the willpower to engage in a lot of the activities that I would consider self-care. Even setting up my massage chair to get a nice back rub requires energy and I don't often have it. Using a tablet or my phone to doom scroll, which is my recharge activities, or read a comic, keeps my brain awake, delays my sleep, and impacts my sleep to the extent that it's not very good quality and I don't feel restored. So it can actually have a negative effect that's unanticipated or not expected typically of a self-care activity. And so often what I end up doing is just climbing into bed, trying to self-discipline myself to not engage in revenge bedtime procrastination, which is the behavior that a lot of us fall back on when we're trying to recharge and engage in self-care. And that can ultimately have destructive or negative side effects. And then I will listen to an audiobook, hang out with my dogs, wait for my sleep medications to kick in, and then clock off and go to sleep. And it kind of leads to a bit of an impoverished life because I don't have the energy a lot of the times to do the things that are going to recharge me. It just feels like one more thing that I have to add onto the list. And if I'm already experiencing executive functioning burnout or overload or overwhelm, generally speaking, I'm just not going to have the willpower to do it. And then I feel guilted by myself for not doing this, for not engaging in the activity that I know I should because it's going to make me feel better. But I also am very cognizant that even if it does make me feel better, it's going to leave me feel even more sapped if I can even make myself do it to begin with. And there's a sense that, okay, well, I'm the one who's responsible for self-care. Nobody else is responsible. I am. And if I don't do it, if I don't recharge, it is my fault. And that's where a lot of shame comes into this. For us as neurodivergents, if we're feeling sapped, it's our fault that we didn't manage our sensory, executive, and social inputs adequately. We didn't engage in enough self-care, notwithstanding how difficult it can be to engage in self-care when you're already at capacity as it is. And we still internalize this message from society, this rugged individualism that pronounces us responsible for our well-being, even when we're struggling. And if we're not getting any better, it's our fault. If we're feeling burnt out, it is our fault. And there's an asterisk attached to that because, like I said, there's lots of complicating factors that we have to take into consideration that are being disregarded and that aren't factored into this whole prescription for self-care. And we lose perspective as a result, and then we engage in shaming of ourselves, and then we feel even more helpless to actually address the underlying need. Now, if we can recognize this obstacle rather than just prescribing blankly, writing this blank prescription that self-care is the solution, and acknowledging that there are other considerations and that maybe self-care might look a little bit different for every person, and that actually maybe we need to leave some gas in the tank for that self-care to begin with and not work too hard or work too long to the point of exhaustion where we have nothing left. Maybe that's what we need to do, is be kind of more realistic about recognizing that self-care can be restorative, but we also need to set aside time and capacity and bandwidth to be able to engage with it to begin with. And then finding a way to identify self-care strategies that aren't necessarily going to detract from our recovery and not necessarily giving ourselves doom scrolling as a reward at the end of a very long, busy, and taxing day. And then the third component is recognizing shame when it bubbles up around this self-care, around experiencing burnout, and recognizing we're not solely responsible for that. Yes, we are our own custodians, but society is the thing that causes us to be taxed. A society designed by neurotypicals for neurotypicals. And the reason we're at capacity is because of this disparity between what our needs are and what the world or what society offers. It is not solely on the individual to strictly manage their well-being if the society itself is designed in a way that is inherently taxing to the point that we don't have often the strength and the will to engage in self-care activities. What are your thoughts about this? Have you struggled with self-care as a neurodivergent? Have you found this kind of generalized prescription for self-care to be a little bit patronizing and not helpful? What have you found as restorative but also doesn't detract from your well-being, like doom scrolling, for example, might in terms of impacting sleep or your general well-being? I would love to hear from you.